He was already a millionaire when he won the lottery. That's what made Jack Whittaker different, and what made his fall harder to watch. In December 2002, on a cold Christmas morning in West Virginia, Jack's Powerball ticket hit the jackpot, $315 million. The largest single-person win in U.S. history at the time. The kind of money that turns a life into legend overnight. He didn't need the money. He owned a successful construction company, a fleet of trucks, and a reputation for hard work. But when he held that ticket, something changed. Not in his bank account, in his balance. The quiet discipline that had built his first fortune began to erode under the weight of his second. He promised to do good. He gave millions to churches, neighbors, and strangers who asked for help. He bought cars, homes, and gifts, not because he wanted them, but because he could. And slowly, the money stopped being a tool and became a test. Within a few years, the headlines shifted. The man who once built homes was now losing his own. The jackpot that made him famous became the number that defined his downfall. Jack Whittaker's story isn't about luck. It's about what happens when fortune arrives faster than wisdom. Jack Whittaker grew up in the small mining towns of West Virginia, the kind of place where hard work wasn't a choice, it was survival. He wasn't born rich, but he understood value early. Every dollar he earned had sweat on it, and every tool in his workshop carried a story. He started his career in construction, digging foundations, fixing roofs, managing crews who built homes for others, long before he could afford his own. He rose through persistence, not privilege. By his mid-50s, he owned his own contracting company and employed dozens of workers across the state. He built his wealth brick by brick, one contract at a time. People who knew him then described him as a man of balance, generous, disciplined, and fiercely independent. He drove pickup trucks instead of limousines, showed up at job sites in steel-toe boots, and believed in the quiet dignity of work. Money, to Jack, wasn't freedom, it was responsibility. By 2002, he had already achieved the American dream the traditional way. A stable business, a home, a family. He gave to his church and sponsored local teams. He didn't chase luck, he managed effort. Then came that Christmas morning. A gas station, a ticket, a number, and a twist of fate that would change everything he thought he knew about money. When the Powerball numbers rolled across the screen, his wife screamed. Jack just stared. He had won $315 million, the single largest Powerball payout ever awarded to one person. The cameras came quickly. Reporters wanted a quote. Neighbors wanted to celebrate. Jack smiled, confident, almost casual. He told them he'd keep working, that the money wouldn't change him. He even said he wanted to use it to help others, to do something good. But wealth is a strange mirror. It doesn't show who you want to be. It reflects who you already are. And even for a man who once built everything by hand, sudden abundance created cracks he couldn't see. He began to trust the wrong people. He lent money without keeping records, gave to anyone with a story, and tried to fix problems that money could never solve. Friends multiplied. So did requests. Soon, strangers were showing up at his doorstep, begging for help, some even threatening when refused. What had once been a symbol of success, his name became a target. He hired security, changed his routine, and started carrying cash, sometimes hundreds of thousands, as if it were armor. But even armor, when worn too long, becomes heavy. Jack had built his first fortune through work, patience, and calculation. The second came through luck, and it began to undo the lessons of the first. Wealth came quickly, and so did everything that follows it: attention, pressure, temptation. Within months of winning, Jack Whittaker became a public figure. His name was in every newspaper, his face on every screen. He wasn't just a lottery winner. He was the lottery winner, the man who beat impossible odds. And that made him a magnet for everyone who wanted a piece of his miracle. At first, Jack tried to live the same way he always had. He still visited job sites, still wore jeans and boots. But fame has a way of distorting even ordinary days. When he went to church, People lined up to ask for help. When he went to dinner, strangers handed him envelopes. Every letter, every phone call carried a story, illness, debt, despair. And Jack, generous to a fault, tried to fix all of them. He gave millions away to friends, charities, strangers. He set up foundations, funded scholarships, and paid for funerals of people he barely knew. He wanted to prove that money didn't change him, but the truth was quieter and harder. Money doesn't change who you are. It changes how the world sees you. Soon, everyone around him acted differently. Old friends became employees. Business partners turned opportunists. Even family began to treat generosity as a given, not a gift. And Jack, once a builder of systems, had no system left. He started carrying bags of cash in his car, sometimes $500,000 at a time. He'd hand out $100 bills to waiters, gas station clerks, and anyone who made him smile. It looked like generosity. It was loneliness disguised as power. The first sign of trouble came one night outside a strip club, where thieves broke into his car and stole nearly $545,000 in cash. Police found the empty briefcase days later. Jack shrugged it off. I can always make more, but he didn't. And what he lost that night wasn't money. It was fear, the healthy kind that keeps people cautious. Then came tragedy closer to home. His granddaughter, Brandy, whom he adored, was found dead of a drug overdose surrounded by friends who had once celebrated his win. The grief hollowed him. The man who once built homes now struggled to stand inside his own. His marriage began to fracture under the strain. He drank more, slept less, trusted no one. The lawsuits followed. Business deals soured. The charitable foundation he'd created began to crumble. By 2007, most of the fortune was gone. The company he built before the jackpot had shut down. The empire of luck had eaten the empire of labor. When reporters came back to ask what happened, he said quietly, "Since I won the lottery, I think there's no control for greed." It wasn't a complaint. It was a confession. Jack Whittaker once thought money would amplify his ability to help others. Instead, it amplified everything he couldn't control: people, promises, and pain. The jackpot that once defined his triumph had become the proof of his undoing. By the time the noise faded, Jack Whittaker was alone. The money was mostly gone. His business had collapsed. His granddaughter was gone. And the man who once stood in front of cameras holding a winning ticket now avoided them completely. He moved quietly through the small towns of West Virginia, the same roads he used to drive before he became a headline. Reporters who tried to find him said he looked older, slower, and somehow smaller, as if fortune itself had taken space from his soul. He stopped talking about wealth. He started talking about peace. For years, Jack had believed that money was neutral, a tool that only magnified intention. If you were generous, money would make you more so. If you were selfish, it would expose that too. But now, sitting in a modest home with only a few possessions left, he realized the truth ran deeper. Money didn't just amplify character, it attracted everything around it. Greed, envy, weakness, and noise. And without discipline, the noise wins. He began attending church again, not as a benefactor, but as a man searching for forgiveness, not from others, but from himself. He told friends that the hardest part wasn't losing the money. It was losing who he was before he won. The version of himself that woke up early, paid attention, trusted effort over luck. He had been a worker all his life, someone who built things that lasted. But wealth that arrives without work teaches you nothing about how to keep it. It's like giving a child a kingdom and expecting him to rule. In interviews years later, his words carried none of the pride that once surrounded him. He didn't speak in anger, just clarity. "I wish I'd torn that ticket up," he said softly. It wasn't the bitterness of regret, it was the exhaustion of understanding. He had won a game no one truly wins. The race for more. What changed him wasn't a single event. It was time. The long, silent kind, the kind that forces reflection, He watched others chase the same dream he once had, believing that money would erase pain, fix families, or buy freedom. He saw their faces on the news, holding checks, smiling, certain they'd be different. And he said the same words to each one. Be careful what you wish for. Abelino. In those final years, Jack returned to simplicity. He repaired what he could, his faith, his habits, his sense of self. He began donating anonymously. No cameras, no praise. He helped quietly, as he once did before fortune found him. And perhaps, in that quiet work, he rediscovered something wealth could never give, the peace of enough. When he died in 2020, at the age of 72, there was no grand estate, no fortune left behind. But there was something else, a story that had turned from cautionary tale to timeless lesson. A reminder that success without structure collapses under its own weight. That financial freedom isn't measured by what you earn, but by what you can walk away from. Jack Whittaker didn't lose everything. He simply learned what everything really was. The story of Jack Whittaker isn't about luck. It's about the limits of it. It's a story of how wealth, when earned slowly, builds character, and when delivered suddenly, tests it. Most people imagine that money solves money problems. But Jack's life showed something else. That wealth without structure isn't wealth, it's pressure. Pressure to spend, to satisfy, to live up to an image others create for you. When he won $315 million, Jack thought of freedom. No more contracts, no more deadlines, no more limitations. But real financial freedom has never been about the absence of limits. It's about learning which limits to keep. Without discipline, freedom becomes indulgence. And indulgence becomes debt of another kind, emotional, relational, moral. The first lesson his life whispers is structure over luck. Money itself doesn't need to be controlled. Behavior does. You can hire accountants, lawyers, and advisors, but no one can manage your impulses for you. The wealthy stay wealthy not because they know how to earn, but because they know how to pause. They build systems that protect them from themselves. Budgets, trusts, boundaries. Jack had none of those. His money moved faster than his attention. And attention, not income, is what sustains wealth. The second lesson is privacy is protection. Jack's generosity was genuine, but public. The moment his name became news, his life stopped belonging to him. Strangers arrived at his door with tears and stories, each one a financial wound waiting for a savior. In trying to heal them all, he opened his own. Financial wisdom begins with one simple truth. You can't save people with money if they refuse to save themselves. Compassion without boundaries becomes self-destruction. The third lesson, and perhaps the most universal, is abundance without purpose leads to emptiness. Money magnifies what already exists. If you are restless, it buys more distraction. If you are lonely, it buys company but not connection. If you are insecure, it buys symbols but not peace. Jack had been a builder. He understood effort, patience, and the satisfaction of progress. But when the jackpot came, progress vanished. He woke up rich and directionless. And no fortune can fill the space where purpose once lived. For investors, entrepreneurs, or anyone chasing success, his story is a mirror. It asks a harder question than, how do I get rich? It asks, who will I become if I do? Financial independence isn't the same as financial intelligence. You can win wealth, but you must earn wisdom. That means understanding where money ends and where meaning begins. It means knowing that protecting your fortune isn't about guarding your bank account, it's about guarding your identity. In the end, Jack's greatest lesson was simple. Wealth will never make you more than you already are. It only amplifies what you've been ignoring. He proved that discipline is the quiet twin of freedom, that the art of staying rich begins long before you ever make a dollar. He once said, I wish I'd torn that ticket up. But perhaps what he meant was something quieter, that if he'd known the price of sudden fortune, he'd have chosen the slow, steady kind instead. Because patience compounds. Luck expires. And the richest man is the one who still feels in control when the numbers change. When the noise around Jack Whittaker finally faded, what remained wasn't silence. It was space. Space to think. Space to grieve. Space to see what all the noise had hidden. He had once stood in front of cameras holding a check that symbolized limitless possibility. Now, years later, he moved through the world like a man who had seen both sides of luck, the gift and the weight. He no longer spoke about millions or jackpots. He spoke about choices. The small, quiet ones that make or unmake a life. People often said Jack lost everything, but that isn't entirely true. He lost money, yes, and reputation, and comfort, but he gained a kind of sight most people never earn. He saw what happens when wealth outruns wisdom. He understood how money, untethered from purpose, becomes noise. And he realized that real fortune doesn't live in numbers, it lives in peace. He once said in an interview, "I just don't like who I've become." It was a heartbreaking sentence, not because it came from regret, but from clarity. He had built 2 empires in his lifetime. One from effort, one from chance. The first taught him discipline. The second taught him humility. And in losing both, he found the border between money and meaning. The story of Jack Whittaker now lives as more than a cautionary tale. It is a mirror held up to every dreamer who believes that wealth is the cure for struggle. It reminds us that struggle has its own wisdom. It teaches restraint, respect, and rhythm. The very qualities that vanish when fortune arrives too fast. In the years after his fall, Jack was often asked what he would tell new lottery winners. His answer never changed. Get a lawyer, get a financial advisor, and don't tell a soul. But behind that practical advice was something deeper, a warning written in silence. Protect your privacy. Protect your peace. Because the world will celebrate your success louder than it will help you survive it. He died quietly in 2020, far from the headlines that once defined him. There was no grand farewell, no mansion sale, no last confession. Just a man, remembered by few, who had everything and learned what enough truly meant. His story lingers because it doesn't end with tragedy, it ends with perspective. A reminder that money, like time, is only valuable when you know how to spend it. Jack Whittaker's empire began with numbers. It ended with understanding. And perhaps that is the truest kind of wealth. The wisdom to know that you never really own anything. You only borrow it for a while. He won fortune, but found truth that peace is the only prize worth keeping.